Panel 9 is entitled Online Education Practices in and Post COVID-19. It's the second of two panels co-convened by Kyushu University. We have the speakers assembling here. And I would like now to call upon the moderator, Professor Toru Oga from Kyushu University, to take over the time, introduce the panel's topic, as well as the speakers that we have for the session. So over to you, Professor Oga.
Okay, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Hello again. Welcome to the panel 9, Online Education Practice in and Post COVID-19. And I'm Toru Oga. And so in this panel, I'm a moderator. I'm moderating this panel. So this is one of the consequences of the COVID-19. I think the online class and online education have become quite common in many countries from the last year. And Asia is not exceptions. But it is not constructive to use online class only because it is an emergency or pandemic. In many countries, I think the efforts are being made to make online classes of higher quality than face-to-face classes. So today's three speakers, they represent those efforts. There are two from Japan and one from the Philippines. So I just quick introduce the speakers. So first speaker will be the Yuto Koizumi, the Tokyo Institute of Technology. And second speaker will be the Piya Pongsapitaksanti. They're from the Kyoto Sangyo University. Sorry for my ill pronunciation. And finally, the final speaker is from Philippines, the Jocelyn Celero. They're from the University of the Philippines. And after three presentations, we invite the educational expert from Korea. This is the Dr. Jinhee Kim, the research fellow, Korean Education Development Institute. Okay, so firstly, shall we start from the Dr. Yuto Koizumi. Each speaker have 15 minutes to present.
All right, so let's begin. Great. Hello, everyone. I'm Yuto Koizumi on behalf of Lion Press, the online publisher operated only by 3 editors, including me. Thank you for inviting me today. I am very happy to be here and deliver this presentation. In January 2020, when the first COVID-19 infectious person was confirmed in Japan, higher education facilities decided to launch remote education in the country, requiring the teachers, most of whom had no remote education experience, to prepare quickly for this new type of delivery. Reflecting on this exceptional situation, we established Lion Press Online to share information among teachers, mostly university instructors. Gathering many reports from teachers, we aim to structure a resource access platform in the 2020 spring and fall terms. We finally published volume 1 of the collection titled The Records of Remote Education in Humanities, Teachers' Efforts in Universities during 2020 in Japan. Following the first one, we published volume 2 online in the same year, including teachers' reports from junior high school, and specialized training college in the fall term. The reports were limited to language, humanities, and the social sciences. There were 148 reports in volume 1 in the spring and 105 in volume 2 in the fall term. This presentation focuses on some characteristic cases from our teaching report collection, particularly from volume 1. In doing so, we can glimpse the status quo of Japan's remote higher education environment, the instructors' methodologies in attempting to maintain the quality of higher education that is remotely delivered, and their unique attempts to study and derive meaning from the COVID-19 experience with their students. This exploration centered on one simple question. What does this prevailing trend of online education mean to educators, students, and universities? To answer this question, on behalf of Lion Press, I will now discuss 3 key points through several cases that emerged from the teacher reports. First, the attempt to form a meaningful and lasting online academic community with students. Second, the consideration of disabled students in remote education. And the third, a proposal for financial aid to support part-time lecturers overload in working with online teaching platforms. Okay, next slide, please. Thanks. Some reports outline the methods instructors use to help students publish their academic translation work as a way of remembering and enhancing their community in the future. For instance, Toshio Onuki, in his class on the European history study in Tokyo Metropolitan University, decided to use Bruce Campbell's The Great Transition, Climate, Disease, and Society in the Late Medieval World, published in 2016, which describes the historical background of the 15th century plague period from a microscopic point of view. This is also an appropriate reference for comprehending the COVID-19 period. In a seminar consisting of 15 students, each participant was required to translate 1 to 2 paragraphs from the book before a class for preparation. They then formed a pair to discuss their comprehension of the text and uploaded Scrapbox, an online application, in order to write and connect their ideas. In the actual lesson, at Zoom seminar, the instructor pointed out the mistranslations or unclear points to help the students better comprehend the text. He also asked critical questions to stimulate discussion on the topic. By analyzing the plague period in the 15th century through this close reading, the seminar members aim to publish an academic work in order to remember their study during the COVID-19 period. As Onuki stated, quote, "It is necessary to record the documents so that each student can remember their study in the university and say, I read this text with my classmates in our seminar during the periods of the pandemic emergency after the pandemic has ceased," unquote. The instructor negotiated with a journal publisher to obtain copyright permission, and the students were able to successfully submit their Japanese translation of The Great Transitions, Chapter 1, to this academic journal. Onuki undertook this endeavor with his students in order to memorialize the seminar community's experience. The students' academic work published in the journal will be an evidence to remember the power of the academic community in 2020. Onuki commented, quote, "This is the best work I did, educating my students through the publication during in the emergency period," unquote. Next slide, please. In one case, an instructor reported using online learning in a painful way to demonstrate how the learning activities are normally socially structured. In a sociology course about discrimination and prejudice, the teacher only uploaded the PDF version of PowerPoint slides and asked the students to take the class on demand and submit their comments through a learning management system. The uploaded slides do not contain any narration, but had a hyperlink. Hyperlink to an online page with the text version of the lecture script. The challenging part was that the students should make the computer read the script out loudly, which sounds computer generated. Yasuo Yabuki, who taught this course at the Rikyo University in Tokyo, intentionally asked his students to embark on this cumbersome way of learning. Besides minimizing a student's data usage only by uploading the PDF and text, he wanted to guarantee accessibility for disabled students with learning problems by providing the entire content in the text version. Furthermore, he wanted his students to realize how the classes they took before COVID-19 had been structured for non-disabled people. In most face-to-face lectures in the classroom, students gather at a specific time and place and listen to the instructor speaking, have non-braille handouts, and watch slides or clips in a 100-minute session. However, this normal in-person environment in higher education is largely inaccessible to many disabled students. For example, with some of these students, movement from home to the classroom can be challenging. They may have difficulty managing the academic schedule and comprehending visual and audio information, and they are often highly anxious in a closed or crowded space. However, remote education with slides and the on-demand style better enable disabled students to engage in academic classes. Through this learning process, the students also became aware of their able-bodied prerogatives. In their feedback, they expressed the instinctive repulsion and dissatisfaction. One student wrote, quote, "Why should I have to do such painful work?" unquote. And another said, quote, "I felt creepy when I heard the synthesized robotic speech read by the PC application," unquote. However, when they understood the purpose of the lecture style, it made sense to most of them. They experienced a remote environment in which learning rights were not guaranteed and realized how unaware they were of their privilege as non-disabled students. Thus, the class provided them with the opportunity to imagine a reality wherein the rights of disabled people are generally not guaranteed. Next slide, please. Thanks. Another report shows a similar example of an instructor designing his lessons with hard of hearing students in mind. Kane Julian, the instructor of a course in an audiovisual studies at St. Andrews University in Osaka, was concerned about the difficulties many students face. For example, they may share a computer with their family, only have a smartphone, or have a weak connection with Wi-Fi. The instructor arranged his room with new lighting equipment and used a microphone and a camera tripod to facilitate the making and uploading of his lecture video to YouTube in the most accessible way for his students. However, what concerned him the most was the deaf and hard of hearing students who were taking the course. To support these students, he decided to put a subtitle on his lecture video when he uploaded to YouTube. Moreover, when this work became somewhat daunting in terms of his upload, he explained his approach with the student support section in the university, and the staff and student volunteers took over the job of creating the subtitles. This case shows the extent of one instructor's dedication to caring for disabled students during the remote education periods, and the importance of cooperation between the universities and teachers. Oh, so the next slide, please. Thanks. Teachers reported that students experienced some anxiety about their privacy when taking face-to-face classes in Zoom, and that they also experienced the anxiety around this, as well as for other reasons. Yumiko Yokota, a part-time lecturer teaching modern philosophy at Gakushuin University, was in trouble to find a quiet place to deliver her lecture. Her spouse is also a part-time lecturer who needed to manage his classes at home, making it challenging for them both to lecture in their home, particularly when their class periods overlapped. This case demonstrates how universities could better support the part-time lecturers who have insufficient space from which to deliver a lecture. We also need to consider how universities can help instructors secure the equipment required to make a video, such as in Julian's case above. Next slide, please. Mami Isambeo, who teaches African studies in English at the Tokyo University of Foreign Studies, argues, quote, "The financial support is desperately needed. Zoom classes require reliable computers and equipment in addition to an optical communication line. However, part-time lecturers often supply these at their expense despite their small salaries. Universities should ask the government for subsidies for part-time lecturers," unquote. Next slide, please. Okay, so now is the time to conclude this presentation. We have discussed here a few of the methods some Japanese university teachers have used to deliver their classes during the remote learning periods imposed by the COVID-19 pandemic. With our collection of teaching reports named the Records of Remote Education in Humanities, we have attempted to explore the question, what does this prevailing trend of online education mean to educators, students, and universities? Is this a welcomed expansion for higher education, or does it represent a confinement in the sense of being stuck in virtual universities without any physical contact? This presentation has described some examples of teachers' efforts to evoke this physical resonance in remote learning environments in 2020. First, we witnessed the novel approach of an instructor attempting to reinforce their remote memory of the academic community experience through a collective published work. Second, instructor successfully using the remote education opportunity to help students recognize disabled students' learning challenges. Finally, the importance of financial aid to support part-time lecturers in remote education has been highlighted. We hope this presentation and our volumes of the collection accessible on the internet will be a helpful resource in responding to the call for remote education in the present and the future. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you for Koizumi Sensei. It is very impressive, and thank you for sharing your creative and ingenious teaching method. And also, he shared problems for the teacher side, the financial and working side. Yeah, it is very interesting presentation. Then let me move to the next presenters. It is the Piya Sensei. Yeah, she will present the university education adaptation in and post-COVID-19, the case of Kyoto Sangyo University.
Yeah, hello, my name is Piya Pongsapitaksanti from Kyoto Sangyo University. I graduated in, I'm Thai, but I'm graduate in Japan and have been here for 20 years. And today I will present about the case of my faculty of sociology, Kyoto Sangyo University, of how our university adapt during COVID-19 pandemic. So it's just about around case study. So you can look at this for one case in Kyoto Sangyo University. Before COVID-19, our university used Moodle for class material, tests, and report to communicate between lecturer and students. But in April 2020, the first semester, our university decided to use Microsoft Teams for online class, but also still use Moodle program for material, tests, and report to communicate between lecture and students. But at that time, it's around 1.5 years before, there are 2 points that I would like to take to discuss, to explain from now. The first is the technology knowledge of lecturer. So our university supports to provide online lecture from the Microsoft Teams expert and also video presentation of online class and Moodle management from Learning Support Center of our university. And also at that time, even myself, I don't know how to conduct online class because it was a new thing for us. So in my case, in our faculty, we have a kind of group support among lecture once a week to practice and rehearsal about using online class. It was very useful for us to have a kind of this group support among lecturers. And the second point is technology knowledge of student, because it's not just what's new for all the lecture, but for the student themselves too. So some students could not follow the system well, and they lost to continue learning on online class, and also a problem about computer and internet access at the first time in the first semester in April 2020. And for the second semester, this is kind of picture because how has changed. Above here is the lecture before COVID-19. We can practice on face-to-face class, but after that, as you can see in the picture, I think this picture is kind of global standard in everywhere in the world, over the world, because we have to wear a mask. Today I have a mask too to have a meeting and class today. And behind is Microsoft Teams program for the student who cannot come to join the class. They join the class behind. So it's kind of hybrid class. This is kind of examples of real class that is changed after COVID pandemic. And the next is in the second semester in September 2020, our university conducted combination between online for the class that have students more than 150 participants and face-to-face class for small class. But at the time, we conducted a face-to-face class for some students, for example, for seminar and for small class. But some students would like to join the online class because transportation. I mean, they don't want to spend time to transport to university, or they want to pay transportation fee to come to university. So then even our university provide face-to-face class, but some students would like to join the online class. So is this some change in learning in our university and in our faculty? And also I would like to concern about lack of network and connection among students, especially for the first year student, because the first year student have never come to have university life, a campus life for face-to-face time. So I think even today I have a meeting with some students, and especially the first year student, they feel very lonely and they don't have any network to connect to artists, to exchange the information about class and university and their campus life. So it's quite bad for them. And now they join online, and for that time our faculty provide online student meeting to make a network between them for senior student and junior student, something like that. And also face-to-face class for first year student, for seminar and fundamental lecture for them. But it's not enough for them, because we cannot provide circle or a kind of network for them in informal relationship. So I think even now this is a problem for actually for the first year student. And now in this year, in the first semester in 2011, in April this year, our university still conducted a class combination between online and face-to-face class. But after that, the station of COVID-19 in Japan was worse at that time. So there was sudden change from face-to-face class to online class, but then the change came to face-to-face class. So it's a bit confused, not just only for lecture, but also students too. But at the time, I mean in this year, lecturer and student are familiar with online class and evaluation online. But there was some problem for fourth year student to have to face online job hunting for them. So I think that it was a tough time for them to have a job online and interview online for them. And now we will conduct second semester for this year in October. So our university still continue class combination between online and face-to-face class, but it should be some change, sudden change again, depending on the station of COVID-19 in Japan. Right. So the second, I would like to conclusion about the concern about COVID-19 adaptation. So as I told you that student connection and network is a problem for them, especially for the first year students. So I'm very concerned about weakness of communication to people, to real people, face to face for them in the future. And for sure, when they grow up to be first year student, I think they will face the problem of job hunting and job interview too. And also there's some problems to concern about academic and knowledge evaluation for class in university level. And the problem is that how to manage the class in the future. And the next thing that I would like to raise in panel discussion is that these global issues, and I think this I'm sorry, it's some cases from my friends in different countries. I think this is kind of global issues, and I would like to, if possible, I would like all of you to discuss about that. This problem is standard in global level or not. That's all for my presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Piya Sensei. There is also interesting introduction to the online class and online education. Yeah, thank you very much. So just a moment. So the final speaker is Jocelyn Celero, from University of Philippines, and she presents Philippine higher education in the time of COVID-19 pandemic, the case of University of Philippines, Diliman. Yeah, Jocelyn, please.
Yes. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Do I sound clear?
Yes.
Yes, okay. All right. All right. Thank you very much. Magandang hapon. Good afternoon from Manila, Philippines. I am Jocelyn Celero from the Asian Center. It's Asia with an N, so as not to be confused with Asia Center, one of the organizers of this conference. It's a graduate school at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. And like Piya Sensei, I'm also an alumna of a Japanese university. I obtained my PhD in international studies at Waseda University in Tokyo back in 2016. Thank you very much to the organizers for this opportunity to participate in this conference for the very first time. I would also like to personally thank Professor Toru Oga of Kyushu University for the invitation to take part in this panel. I slightly changed my presentation to further focus the discussion onto my home college, the Asian Center, rather than discuss more broadly my home university, which is the University of the Philippines, because the university consists, in fact, of 26 colleges, and these colleges have diverse approaches to flexible learning in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So while the current pandemic is fundamentally a global health crisis, it severely hit the education system of countries around the world. In particular, Philippine higher education institutions experienced massive disruption in classes, all school-related activities, including on-the-job training and internship of graduating students. My university, among others, was given the autonomy to make judgment on the inclusion of flexible learning and other alternative means of teaching and learning delivery, such as emergency remote teaching, which consists of online and offline learning paths last year. So this presentation examines how higher learning has shifted to adapt to the current global crisis. This presentation builds upon various government reports, related literature, and my own experiences as an academic and faculty member of the Asian Center. Like I said, is a graduate school and is one of the 26 colleges at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Next slide, please. So the Philippine education in general and higher education institutions in particular had to grapple with the reality that even before the pandemic, the education sector is one of the least prioritized areas of national budget allocation. And such reality is further reinforced in the Philippine government's pandemic response, which is summed as Bayanihan, We Heal as One Act. The budget allocated for the education sector is only 7 billion pesos, which is around 140,000 US dollars, used to address pre-existing conditions of unequal access to online learning. The limited financial support extended by the government only exposes the bigger inequality in access to online learning, which creates a disparity not only between private and public universities, but also those institutions in the metropolis and geographically isolated and disadvantaged areas that needed to bear the brunt of the impact of the pandemic, as well as the pre-existing scarcity of resources, technology, and internet connectivity that are vital for emergency remote teaching. Thirdly, the pandemic has also exposed universities to uneven quality of learning and research experience. Not all institutions are able to design a reliable and sustainable modality that accommodates multiple facets of learning, teaching, communication, research, and evaluation. As a result, many universities struggle balancing the needs of its colleges, students, faculty, and staff, as well as the interests of its partner institutions. And such is also experienced by my home university, the University of the Philippines. Next slide, please. Okay, so the Commission for Higher Education, or CHED, the main agency of the national government that is in charge of addressing the challenges related to the pandemic, proposed flexible learning last year as a policy response. Well, a lot of policy terms surfaced at the early onset of the crisis, such as remote learning, blended learning, distance learning, online learning. SHED declares that flexible learning is an all-encompassing approach that allows the use of several learning delivery models that work beyond space and time and attends to diverse learning requirements of a variety of students. Flexible learning also allows for combining digital and non-digital technology, as well as face-to-face and in-person learning. It has three key elements, namely pace, or the delivery schedule, place, referring to physical location or learning environment, and mode, or the set of learning devices utilized. Next slide, please. Okay, before addressing the key presentation objective of shedding light on the flexible learning experience at the Asian Center, I would like to provide an overview of my institution to give a sufficient context to this discussion. The Asian Center is an MA and PhD degree granting institution mandated by law to offer Asian Studies and Philippine Studies programs. It exists to develop a closer relations with Asia through learning and scholarship, to form knowledge about Filipino national identity in relation to Asia, to understand the Philippines as situated within Asian context, and to make sense of Asia from the perspective of the Philippines. We are a small college population-wise, but we also take pride in being one of the crucial hubs for training the country's future diplomats, ambassadors, and area studies experts. Next slide. Okay, so on to the discussion on how the Asian Center has approached flexible learning under the current pandemic. The main feature of such approach are the course packs. Now, I do not have an image of a course packs, but I tried my best to describe it here. Some universities in the country might have used the term module, but in our university and in my college, course packs are a bundle of structured course materials that support not only the learning needs of the students, but also provides the learning resources, class guide, requirement guide, mode of delivery of course activities, as well as the rubrics for evaluating the performance of the learners. So it is a complete learning package that permits students to cope with the course requirements at their own pace, with or without the guidance of instructor. While independent learning is what is expected of our graduate students, we as faculty members still commit to open communication, having an open line of communication, and on-time delivery of feedback to our students that are indispensable to effective implementation of the course packs. The flexible part of the learning process is also observed through the blended pace of it. We combine synchronous or whole class interaction and asynchronous or offline and independent learning tasks, which allow students to process assigned weekly materials on their own. In terms of place, face-to-face modality is still discouraged, at least at my college, since there is no laboratory or fieldwork required to complete courses. Most of the learning activities are done virtually using a combination of available learning management systems and video conferencing applications. At UP entirely, the prescribed learning management system is called UVLE. Now, I have an image of that in the next slide. UVLE is short for University Virtual Learning Environment, which has been the main digital platform used across colleges and has Zoom, Google Classroom, and Microsoft Teams features, but less advanced than a Moodle until recently due to a series of upgrading efforts. In line with the upcoming semester, our semester will start next week. I'm going to discuss a bit of this in the next slide, but at this point, I'd like to emphasize that the learning management system utilized university-wide is pivotal to the conduct of classes, coursework, and communication between instructors and students. Another equally important feature of flexible learning at the Asian Center during the pandemic has been maximizing institutional collaborations online. Forging interactive learning with our students and those in from our partner institutions has been facilitated as an important component of my own flexible learning approach. In the absence of travel and study tour opportunities, the virtual space has been vital to implementing learning activities among our students and those students from different universities. In my case, as an instructor implementing Japan courses, I utilize my professional networks. In my course on social and economic development in Japan, for instance, I partnered with Doshisha University, through which my students were able to work with Japanese students on a research project that benefits both Japanese and Philippine economies. They collaborated on developing business proposals and product or service presentations done in class. In other courses taught, like my other colleagues, I was able to tap into the expertise of some scholars based overseas to speak and get into as part of enriching the class discussion on select course readings. I consider these efforts a great achievement in implementing flexible learning format during the first semester last year, and I hope to replicate this arrangement this coming semester. Next slide, please. So this slide shows you a comparison of the flexible learning tools made available and adopted at the University of the Philippines since March last year. Since then, many faculty members have transitioned to the OVLE, the main digital platform of the university, due to its gradual enhancement in terms of storage capacity, for the files that are being accumulated by instructors, no? And incorporation of some of the useful features available in other tools, namely Google Classroom, Google Hangouts, Zoom, and Microsoft Teams. Next slide, please. This will be my last slide. No? For my last slide, I'd like to highlight that despite the pile of challenges the current pandemic has brought to higher education in the Philippines, it has also generated opportunities to promote significant advancements in higher learning. First, there has been a continuous training and development among faculty members than ever before, no? Given that there is a huge disparity in technological know-how and resource utilization capabilities among them. Secondly, there is an ongoing expansion of open educational resources, or OERs, to support the learning and research needs of students and faculty, especially those in the graduate school, whose mission is to produce and circulate new knowledge. Third, there is also a periodic and continuous redesigning of course packs to accommodate changing needs for learning and assessment of such experiences. In fact, after this, I have to go back to finalizing my course packs because the deadline for the submission is tomorrow. And finally, my college and my home university have been committed to sustaining strong and open support systems to ensure not just the quality of teaching and learning during this difficult time, but also to protect the mental well-being of our faculty and students. So this ends my presentation. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Maraming salamat po.
Okay, Jocelyn, thank you for your presentation. It is also impressive presentation, and I think the situation is very similar in Japan. The quality of education and the financial problems, and also technological problems. Then let me move to the discussant. So the discussant commentator is the Dr. Jinhee Kim, the research fellow. The research fellow of the Korean Educational Development Institute. So could you have a comment and discussion to the 10 to 15 minutes? Okay.
Okay. Thank you for this great opportunity. This is one greeting from Seoul. It is really my honor to engage with you for amazing stunning presentation that really gives a lot of insight, and we can expand our discussion for academic area. Well, actually, if I may introduce myself, I am UNESCO consultant for global citizenship education. I'm also, the government advisor for higher education committee in Korea, South Korea. But my personal academic PhD background is lifelong education, lifelong learning, which is it's more higher, more bigger frame for not just for schooling education. I talk more about social education. It might include with the ICT in education and online learning or distance learning. So three presentation gives a lot of interest for me, and I'm also engaged with a big national research for the pandemic area, how our university student, the college student, how's their learning trajectory is undergoing, what is difficulty for faculty members, what kind of support do we need. So including me, 11 professors engaged with this whole project. This is really big project. So the outcome will be published the end of this year, maybe December. After that, I hope to share with you the outcome with you, maybe if I can engage with you next time. My discussion maybe contribute for 3 points. First of all, let me move on first presentation and second presentation, third presentation, and then including all presentation. I'm gonna give some more idea for that. First of all, the first presentation, that perspective is quite underlining for faculty matter, as my understanding. The second presentation is more about what students matter, how the students feel, how do they adapt their for COVID-19 situation. The third presentation is, for me, it seems like more about UNESCO's agenda. So how our flexible learning can go through for our student matter. Of course, that is really important. As you know, UNESCO Asia Pacific, we have our 46 member country. So flexible learning is one of the significant matter for education agenda. So when I heard about first the professor's presentation, I thought about we also need a very sophisticated faculty support. Because as you presented, privacy matter, so we need people also consider about their background for their Zoom situation. Do they need more space? Do they also show some, some privacy issue? But education sociologist's perspective, we saw that we define that issue is more about SES for social, economic, status matter. It's not about just privacy issue. Maybe the faculty member, if they have some tenure position or non-tenure position, like patron lecturer, they have a more huge burden, which is similar in Korea. So we also have non-tenure professors and hardship, their difficulty. They are undergoing harder suppress because tenure professor do not want to engage with some tribal or small job. They also push down try to give more work for a part-time lecture issue. That shows unequal treatment for faculty issue. Number two is we also talk about a lot of teacher, professor, and their student, they lost connection in terms of communication. As your presentation also showed about the engagement issue. I think in Korean society, we have a tendency, the more you are older professor, you might be male professor, that professor is really has difficulty for communicating using ICT, framework or technical issue. So it's not, we cannot generalize everything, but professors, the transferable skill is very important because COVID-19 issue is really an unexpected event. So this is very important. That can show some faculty support issue. Let me move to second presentation. I think that second presentation is quite similar with in Korea's big research project. We also have some students, especially freshman students, they consider this COVID-19 is normal. This is new normal situation for them. So they said that when we got interview with a freshman student, they don't want to go to university, even though they feel lonely, because it is second professor also said about the transportation issue, the cost issue. The students think about their, so they calculate which is effective or not. But at the same time, they lost a lot of connection with the faculty issue. They don't know about the professor's pace. They don't know about their friends, their semester friends' face, because everybody has a mask. And people don't try to open their camera. That is another hidden issue. So we have a lot of concern about this freshman students. How do they engage with the society? How do they fully, understand their academic like a knowledge and skill level issue. That is important issue. So when I move to number 3 is that the professor, just saw the professor's presentation. It is very important. The flexible learning is very critical issue, and in Korea, a lot of research, the policy and the government policy will underline the importance of flexible learning. But there are a lot of high skeptical issue. What can we define flexible? Flexible learning for whom? Even though we provide the flexible learning facility, or there's some university like Seoul National University and the Yonsei Korea top university in Korea, even though they have a great facility, as you know, Korea has top facility in terms of ICT. A lot of students, they have a 2 tablet, they willing to buy their expensive, computer matter. They can provide it, they can expose to very sophisticated, expensive learning mechanism. But they're under the COVID-19, even some students, they cannot fully engage with their learning. They cannot digest. As there are a lot of professors also talk about that, this ambiguity, unclear point is a big issue for academic learning. So academic learning is not about just rhetoric. When we evaluate the students' performance, this is a very questionable situation. So many professors in Korea also try to give a high grade for them, because we are suffering for COVID-19's the hindrance, but the grade is not real. So in terms of an education expert, education scholar like me, we are trying to monitor about how they're learning. What is the real value for the learning in COVID-19 issue? So we have to go back to the more fundamental question for that. So I think as Zygmunt Bauman and Uli Beck, like a big philosopher in the world, they thought about, our global society is full of risky and ambiguity and complexity. So next generation, maybe after COVID-19, we can have confess another COVID-19 issue. Maybe that can be another pandemic. After that, how can we adjust with that? How can we adjust with another disaster? So at this time, we have to consider about transferable, skill. We have to consider about resilience, how to resolve our problem. That is important issue. I think at this moment I can wrap up my discussion like this form, but let me give you final thought as a discussant. I think we are also adapting this, like a remote the conference. Like we can adjust, we can adapt for Zoom issue. Some is very efficient. We don't have to pay the money for transportation, but at the same time, a lot of colleagues, there are colleagues, a lot of research as scholar, we concern about what is real connection, real communication. And that means, what about our students, like at 20 years old, they're 24, they're 25, maybe higher education institute, they're still young, youngsters. So how they, engage with this unexpected pandemic issue next time. I think that's our role. That's our mission for them, to give a better future for them. So although we are not perfect, we have to, we do need a more deep research. We do need a more sophisticated policy. We do need a more, sincere discussion among the colleagues. That is a really important issue. Thank you. This is my humble opinion.
Okay, thank you very much. And yeah, it is a very good discussion comment. So actually there are many questions from floor, but firstly, we have to focus on the discussant, the Jinhee Kim's point. So could you answer the Jinhee's point one by one? The firstly, Yuto, Koizumi.
Yes, sure. The question is mainly about how sophisticated the university's system should have been. Well, my question is, truly, university should care a variety of teachers and students, but it's quite difficult for me to say the system under COVID-19 in Japan was not sophisticated enough. So we wanted to highlight this point by showing the last two cases. Like Kane Julian's case and Mami Zambe's argument. So, I mean, insufficient online equipment and subsidies, particularly for part-time lecturers. Well, the COVID-19 situation is reveal the problem we have faced for such a long time in terms of the university faculty and teachers. Because in Japan now, maybe it's a worldwide trend, but in Japan, it's becoming more and more, difficult to get a tenure job for part-time lecturers. So the COVID-19 situation and remote education revealed that problem, highlighted the problem, and they, in trouble beforehand, became troubled much more than before because they, how to make equipment for their, lighting equipment and showing, recording of their lecture with a camera and video, and they have to make all of them by themselves with a small salary. So that's one of the things we are concerned much. And they are also, these part-time lecturers had no resources and experience to do the remote education in a sophisticated way. So they learned it from the beginning, and they made lots of mistakes in the first part of remote education. So, in the springtime in 2020. And one of the things we found out interesting in editing or, calling for papers for our publishing is that much of part-time lecturers felt hesitancy to write something about their teaching because they knew that they made lots of mistakes, like I did in today's presentation. I was using a Mac PC, and I was 15 minutes earlier than this presentation, and I tried to adjust my PowerPoint slides with this presentation, but it didn't work. So, I wasn't able to make two, screens on my PC, and in my imagination, and I just imagined I could do that by reading my script sophisticatedly with the fantastic slides, but it didn't work at all. So I tried this kind of thing during my presentation. So it happens. That's a reality. It many times it never successful, and this is experiences all of the teachers had with their classes, with a class, for example, with 40 students or something like that. So that's a hesitancy of the teachers. They felt a little bit embarrassed to do these mistakes and wrote about that. But what I want to emphasize on behalf of Lion Press is that these reports of these mistakes of part-time lecturers online remote education is precious reports for us and for teachers. And we just said, it's okay to open up, to show your mistakes and how you toiled, how you made effort to adjust, your non-experienced teaching experience to do in the universities. So look at, well, unfortunately, these reports, almost all of these reports were written in Japanese. But if you read Japanese, you will find out much mistakes, lots of mistakes of these part-time lecturers, even just a little bit, mechanic problems. But that's precious. We want to gather. That's really important things, and we can learn them and how to adjust them to the future. And yes, and that makes a sort of empathy, among the teachers in Japan and maybe hopefully the worldwide, if this kind of reports are presented in English, like in this presentation time. So yeah, sorry to speak a lot of times. So but that's all for me now. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, the next, the Jocelyn, please, because the Piya sensei is now out of here and she's back in the 15 minutes. So, by the way, the Jocelyn, please.
Yes, okay. Thank you so much, Ms. Kim, for the comments. No, but I'd like to address. I want to pick up the comment on the whose flexibility. So basically, I highlighted that the flexible learning approach has three elements, no, namely pace, place, and mode. And the fact that these elements are negotiated, no, based on the resources, learning resources. Based on the learning needs, no, and goals of or objectives of the course being offered, and also the available learning devices, no, accessible to the learners, to the students. This is where the flexibility happens, no, because teachers, no, instructors have to be able to consider, no, the situation, no, of the students and whether they are able to cope with the demands of the courses. In consideration of these three elements, no, so these should be adjusted by the instructors, no, after gaining knowledge of the the resources, no, connectivity and what else? The technology, no, made available to or available, no, at the disposal, no, of the students. So even before the start of the semester, we always conduct a survey to know whether there are some students who might not be able to, adapt to the flexible learning format, maybe due to connectivity issue. And then the university, in fact, has addressed this by funding the internet mobile or Wi-Fi connection of some students who cannot afford to, buy or pay for internet connection on a regular basis. And also the university has funded the internet service of all faculty members so that they be able to, conduct classes at home. So I think all those support, institutional support, and also the considerations that are being made, no, by instructors are very vital to be able to make flexible learning approach effective, and it's always the best interest of students, no. So students should be able to adapt to the course requirements based on whatever conditions they are experiencing. So there are also cases where students who are in the geographically disadvantaged areas, and then instructors have to print out the materials, the course packs, and deliver it to them so that they can also learn at their own pace, no, despite the limited maybe access to connectivity, because there are really isolated areas in the Philippines where internet connection is a problem, perpetually a problem. So that has been the style. But in some cases, because the funding of every college is very limited, sometimes faculty members shell out money to be able to reproduce material. So there's really some, some adjustments like that have some sacrifice that needed to be done, no, from the instructors end. I agree that despite the adequate technology and maybe learning devices that are available to the students, there's no guarantee that they are 100% performing. And I experienced this over the last 2 semesters of we've been doing flexible learning. And students and even faculty like me have been very vocal about the difficulty to focus, no, on the demands of the course, especially in the graduate school where there's really a ton of readings every week and they really have to commit to them. And it also doesn't help the fact that a lot of our students are full-time employed. They are not full-time students. So they also have to work. And our classes begin at 5 p.m. because that's after work that they are able to attend, switch to their role as students, no? And so that adds another burden to that distraction or focus, a difficulty to focus on their. But that has been the case even before the pandemic. But I guess because of the pandemic, I think that exacerbated the difficulty to focus on their learning, their student obligations. And a lot of our students have been vocal about this. So in response, the university circulated a memo to again exercise flexibility by adjusting our deadlines. So in the submission of course requirements. So as instead of the usual, periodic kind of submission of deliverables or outputs in the course, we see to it that our students are given a leeway, to produce all their requirements at the very end of the course. So even if it's like way too late already, like that is something that has been strictly regulated in the past. But now I think time has been very much flexible or adjusted to accommodate, to give considerations to many of our students who have been struggling to manage their obligations. And I think that is that kind of adjustment can be also placed under the I think the university-wide call for developing a sustainable support system, because you cannot just be. I mean, compassion is something that's something that's intangible, but it can be a virtue that could unify all faculty members and students alike that are coping with the pandemic right now. And we see to it that the quality of learning is not sacrificed despite some considerations not being given like that. So I think that's and I don't have the answer to the question of how we can actually maybe draw lessons from all these flexible learning experiences that we are already adopting at the moment. How can we carry this over maybe as we face another pandemic or maybe post-COVID, new normal kind of context. But I guess, having a conference like this would allow us to share, and share some of the best effective practices and find maybe some kind of sympathy or empathy in similar struggles, and maybe think through how we can approach maybe those overcome those similar struggles. And I sympathize with Piya Sensei a while ago when he mentioned that the challenge really in the production of academic knowledge is huge. And I think all these barriers to that task that we are facing right now, I think requires a continuing dialogue. So I'm glad that there's a conference like this that would allow us to dialogue on these problems, because these are real and global also, not just specific or unique to the Philippine context. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now we have a kind of queue of the questions from floor. Okay, firstly, the first queue, we have 3 questions to each speakers. The first question from floor to Professor Yuto Koizumi. Was there any record of the student experience in the Lion Plus? And did the university of those featured in the Lion Plus support the equipment need of the lecturers? And okay, I omit question to the Piya-san, and so I go to the question to the Jocelyn. Did the COVID-19 impact the number of overseas scholarship and Philippine potential higher education was able to secure? Did online learning enable or disable these options? Yeah, could you answer one by one those questions? Yeah. Firstly, yeah, Koizumi Sensei.
Can I clarify the latter part of the question? The first one is, was there any records of university students, and or did we think about it? But the latter part is a little bit unclear for me. So can you repeat it, please?
Did the university of those featured in the Lion Press support the equipment needs of the lecturers?
I see. Okay, for the first one, we actually thought about it, and we talked a little bit about the students' experience, but we just prioritized the teacher's experience, and that's the kind of optional topic in the future for our, the new publication, perhaps. And but the thing is, the teacher's reports, interestingly, include students' experience or students' feedback, as I did in the second. As I just reported in the second case, some students in the feedback showed his dissatisfaction about how the class was managed. And this is a very, important voice from the students. And lots of reports talked about these students' feedback and their comments. And not all of them are about their dissatisfaction. And they also showed some reports like their feedback of satisfaction. And like the first one about academic community is a good example. The students were happy to make academic community, and they successfully submitted their academic work in a journal. So that's a kind of, a sort of beautiful cooperation between students and teachers, and that was successful. But of course, we also, had severe comments from students, which is also natural. So we are happy, that both type of cases. This is the first one. And our second question about any like subsidies or any support from universities or from any group to the Lion Press. Yes, and our third publication we are planning now has a sort of support from non-governmental support that is supposed to help teachers to like publish or make a good research in their field. So this is one example for our third publication we are planning now. And but for the first and second one, we almost originally made up our publication press, and that's the important thing. That's like it's like we should have talked about it more and asked for these supports from universities or something like that. And yes, that's a very important question. Thank you for these questions.
Okay, thank you. And Jocelyn, please.
Yes, thank you for the questions. I tried to look at the chat box because they're quite long. So the first question is about the overseas scholarships. No, actually, the university circulated a memo discouraging students from applying for overseas scholarships. And there's also a travel ban, discouraging faculty members, fellows and staff from traveling overseas, for conferences, because usually is the university would fund, some of these overseas engagements. So, but because of the pandemic, I think we were discouraged, and also because UP is a government university, it's a public university, so the university prioritizes actually channeled the funding for such a professional development. The professional development fund was channeled to support COVID-related endeavors, of the university. So I think with that said, there's a decrease, in the overseas scholarships. But I would say that this is not, I guess, only for 2020. For the time being, that the country is still trying to recover. But a lot of these scholarships, research grants, collaborations, I am as Japan Studies coordinator of my college, I am supposed to organize an annual study tour to the Kansai region, and I had to just delay that. So we still have the money. It's just that it's being shelved for a moment because we cannot send students and faculty overseas. So I guess that is also the case in other colleges. And then secondly, just to give maybe some insights into the student behaviors, and how they are adjusting to the online learning. I think I'm quite flexible. I don't really require students to open their camera all the time, especially if there's a connectivity issue. But the thing about graduate school is because they are the ones usually in charge of class presentations and discussions, and I'm usually the one moderating or maybe just guiding them throughout. They are forced to be always active and very much engaged in the materials. And that is one way in which we can ensure that they will not be dependent on whatever teacher, whatever the instructor is delivering online. So they are part of the learning process. So I think that kind of dynamic pushes students to be more committed to online learning. So there are cases where really students would remind or would email us, would email me and tell, I say that they're maybe sick or not feeling well, or maybe they are in the middle of work, like they are just attending class, passively, but they're unable to participate. And such, considerations, such conditions require considerations on our part. And we do that. And what's important is there's an open line of communication. On the issue of mental health, this is very serious. And in fact, maybe 2 months ago, we had a faculty meeting, and we were alarmed by the rising number of students that have been dealing with mental health issues, and also maybe some kind of depressions, because some of our students are working and some of them were laid off, they lost their jobs, and that also affected their motivation to pursue their studies. And sometimes we cannot hold them and if they decide to take a leave of absence or temporarily withdraw from the program, and such is the case now, we just have to remind them of their time in the program. But a mental health issue is a serious problem now, and even before the pandemic. And so far the university has developed a facility that it's called PsychServe. It's like an online, psychosocial service provided by the university to attend to the needs through counseling, faculty and staff and students. But I think it's been insufficient. So I also would like to acknowledge the efforts of other like civil society organizations that are creating similar initiatives also, because I think the university facility cannot do this alone. And there has to be other sources of support that can be tapped by the university. But from our college end, I think we are admittedly inadequate in addressing mental health issues. So I think in the coming months, it's going to be maybe one of the goals, priority areas that we should look into if we want to really safeguard our, like I myself experienced a student lashing out in my class and I didn't know what to do. And such is really a challenge. I'm ill-equipped, admittedly. And this is really something that we have to work together as a college, as a unit, because we really have to have a concerted effort on tackling this. We cannot just brush this off because this is something really serious. So hopefully there's something that would come out of our planning in the coming months. There should be concrete, strategies to be able to address mental health issues of our students and also faculty that are dealing with these students. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, the Piya-san is back. So the one question from floor to the Piya-san, given the move to online learning and teaching, was there any adjustment in the fees? I think it's a tuition fees. And was there demand to the lower fees, and how did the university respond? And I think it is very critical questions for the Japanese universities.
I'm thinking the station were different between among the university in Japan, but in my case, in my university, in April 2020, I mean last year, our university provide how can I say payback to them for computer and internet access for student is around 50,000 yen, or is around $5,000 for each student, but they have to apply for that attachment fee to get the money back for them to buy computer or to access the internet or something like that. But as I know, not all students apply for that. As I know, it's around half of them apply for that. But also we got some complaint from some parents that how the university manage why university provide the all face-to-face class for the student to access it in the university, something like that. But just some parents from all of the students. So I think all in all, I think more of students and parents and the family understand the station, and they don't mind about that institution fee that much as my opinion. Yeah, because university have to provide not just only face-to-face atmosphere or environmental environment, but we have to provide the academic and provide the graduation for them. So I think most of students at my university understand the station. No, right. So this is all of my answer. Yeah. And yeah, there are some questions about health issues for students.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. I think as today, even today, I met some students, and I think they feel some isolation because they have to study alone. So yeah, I think if the station come to better, I think information exchange and face-to-face communication is still important for especially for the first year student. But I would like to raise that not just only student health issues, but also lecturer health issue too. Right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so there's some speakers will answer the question shortly. But okay, the second line of the question is there are these three questions. The first three, the question to all speakers. In the light of the use cloud resources, what is the framework for the data protection and privacy in your respective jurisdiction and universities? This is the first question. And the second question is to the all speakers and discussants. What is your experience of the behavior of the student when they are online teaching? The cameras are on or off, and levels of interaction is low and high, and what is the main complaint? And the third question is the mental health issues. So yeah, should online lectures have to address the mental health issues of the student? Okay, could you answer one by one? Okay, by the opposite order, from Jocelyn.
I think I already addressed it, Olga Sensei. I already answered it. But just the one question that I missed was the framework for the data privacy. I'm not really familiar with the framework, but what I know is that we follow because the Philippines has a Data Privacy Act, and a lot of the guidelines that we adhere to in the university is based on the provisions of the Data Privacy Act. So we don't just circulate private information or materials that are from maybe not reliable sources like that. We are being warned from time to time on how to properly manage or circulate resources, open educational resources. And I think the library, the university library is in charge of circulating those open educational resources, and what websites, learning websites, tools are allowed to be accessed by our students and faculty. But that's about it. Those that are discouraged or like not welcomed or not allowed for use, of course, sometimes faculty would suggest, like this particular journal or particular repository needs to be accessed, because maybe they contain canonical materials, readings for the course. It's still a challenge to this day because there's limited budget as well on how many how many open educational resources can be purchased by the university. Again, this boils down to that very macro issue in the Philippine context, the very limited budget that is being allocated for education. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. What about Piya-san?
Right. As Celero Sensei told about that, and she was an expert in cloud resources. Me too. I'm not expert in cloud resource, but at my university, we buy a kind of license, something to show some video or some music from internet or something like that, and the university pay for that. So I said no, and yeah. I think the system itself, I mean, Microsoft Teams or even Moodle system itself, they protect the protection itself too. So if there are some problems here, maybe students or lecturer themselves, they bring this data on social media or something. So I think it should be a problem for copyright about protection and privacy. Yeah, that's all for my answer.
Okay, and Koizumi Sensei.
Sure. Sorry, before answering this question, for the previous question about university subsidies, I should have mentioned about the Kyushu Daigaku's support to Lion Press. And we are really gratefully thankful for the support. And Oga Sensei led us to, lots of conferences, including this. So thank you so much. And for the first the question about, crowd resources. Well, it really depends on the university. Some university actually bought licenses for the flexibility of using, textbooks and audiovisual devices and see DVDs, and some universities are very supportive for that. But the other universities haven't done much. So that made a lot of trouble for some lecturers, particularly who uses audiovisual staff to teach students. Like me, I teach film studies. So for lecturers who teach film studies, it's impossible to use a DVD in an actual classroom in face-to-face situation. So it's not workable to show DVD on Zoom to the students. And that's very critically significant for me. And the last result I did was YouTube. So sharing a YouTube URL, and I just took time for students to see the clip and then go back to the main room and talk about the scene and make kind of discussion. So YouTube had a lots of workable supports in my study, but it really depends on the lecturer. So that's what I want to say now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Then going to the Jinhee Kim, do you have any another comment or additional comment to those?
Well, as I give a small inner insight for my discussant, my final question is for three of you, to presenters, what kind of a lesson when we get learned from this pandemic situation? As I told, there will be another upcoming pandemic or risky risk or uncertainty for our modern contemporary society. So as a scholar, as an educator, three of a professor, what kind of lesson can you give for higher education's development or students, the growth? So maybe just 1 minute, 5111 would be very significant for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, very good questions. Okay, how about from Koizumi Sensei?
Just can I clarify what is your message in the question? Can you just repeat it?
What kind of lesson can you learn from this pandemic issue that is also related with what kind of further upcoming, our readiness for another upcoming pandemic or risk society? For as an educator, we have to prepare about that. We need a more bigger future perspective for that.
So the possible further risk in the field of education, if you ask me, I would say, again, I like to emphasize the mental health of students and instructors, and they are in trouble to manage these things. And in private, they cannot go out still, and they had no way to get relaxed. And what can we do for this is, one of the ideas is that the teacher, if they think about the communication with the students, make some opportunities to talk about them. Like it's like an online kind of meeting up communication. And I've heard from some reports that some instructors voluntarily made some opportunities to just, see their seminar students and talk about going on research. And they just, clarified how many problems or what kind of problems do they have, both in private and in the field of research. Well, it's quite difficult to ask directly something private about students' situation. So we have to be careful not to ask some too much private things, but still it's really important, significant to make these opportunities, even if it's outside classroom, outside the schedule of the university. Thank you.
Thank you. And Piya-san?
Yeah, what I learned from this economic COVID-19 pandemic, I learned that learning is everywhere and not just in the classroom. So I'm a bit optimistic about this, but I think this COVID pandemic catalyzed online learning all over the world faster than, I don't know, maybe 20 years. So the station is come better. Even now we have an online conference. I can go back, I can go to meeting and then come back here. Yeah, for it's online. It was possible maybe 5 years ago or 2 years ago, but now we can do that. So we have to accept the change of the station of the world anytime. So I think learning is everywhere, and we know that, every student know that, lecturer know that, we all know that not just in the classroom is a place for us to learn and to study. So yeah, I think it's good for us to change in changing world like this. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jocelyn? Yeah.
Yeah, I think if there's anything I learned from coping with the pandemic, the current pandemic now, I think it's really making sense of the word flexibility. It's not just because there's a flexible learning approach that has been developed and enforced as a policy by the Commission for Higher Education, and also being implemented by universities, and then down to my college, among other colleges in the Philippines. But really, it's all about being able to adapt to change, because change is constant. And I think crisis is inevitable every now and then, because I think crisis could come from the environment, from biological hazards and all that. I think it's not going to go away. I think I have been teaching and telling my students that we have to live through COVID. We have to, get used to that there will be from time to time a crisis like this. And I think it reinforcing the resilient virtue among Filipinos. I know sometimes this is also has a downside to this, just being able to cope with crisis as a kind of a mindset. It has a downside. There's a downside to it as well. But I think resilience can be embraced fully if there's this sufficient support system available, and this must come from the university itself, and then down to the instructors, and then down to the students. And I also agree with what Koizumi Sensei mentioned, that sustaining an open line of communication should be the norm, And I experience how difficult it can be, for students to open up, for them to disclose whatever personal issues they're dealing with. But for some students who are cooperative and see the value of openness, they get help. They get the necessary help, that they need in order to get by in the course. And hopefully, if we are able to promote that kind of culture of openness, I think solidarity will be easy to be maintained, as part of the practice, of that complement resilience in any particular crisis, not just now, not just the current crisis, but in the future crisis, So I think those are my insights. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think it was a very good discussion, and very good discussion for the online learning and online education. Yeah, thank you for your cooperation.
Thank you very much, the panel here from Kyushu University.